Everyone has a shadow. The shadow in spirituality refers to the ego, or the darkest part of yourself. If we are going off the yin and yang structural example, the primary aspect of consciousness would be your divine self, and the secondary aspect would be the shadow. The yin and yang represents a dynamic balance of opposing but complementary interconnected forces known as qi. You cannot have one side without the other, as both are needed to keep the other in balance. Humans do their best to navigate both opposing aspects of self in an eternal tug-of-war, which can sometimes feel like the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. Some people experience their shadow self as a cruel voice in their heads that they cannot silence. Other people will nurture this voice and fall in love with the darkest aspects of it. And then there are individuals who will do everything they can to neutralize the shadow voice so they can live their life in peace. Many do this by applying spiritual practice to their lives with the intention of purifying and elevating their consciousness. Your shadow self is at its strongest when you're feeling weak. This may occur when you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or when you feel afraid, lonely, tired, or are experiencing a weakness in the body due to fluctuating hormones or illness, when you're angry and in the middle of an argument, or when you feel threatened. In order to find your true happiness, you must face the shadow self and reparent it. This takes courage, commitment, and faith. For some people, their shadow can completely take over their mind and is not necessarily interested in your health or well-being. The shadow will throw you under a bus just to be right and is hell-bent on its own survival. It does not want you to recognize that the highest part of yourself is your true consciousness. It fears that if you do, the shadow will cease to exist, and it will always put up a fight for its own survival and domination. The danger in the shadow part of yourself is that it consistently contradicts itself and runs on broken, limiting belief systems that you have had since you were a child and, in result, operates haphazardly. And it knows it. It doesn't want you to know it, so it lies and covers up the truth of its brokenness by compensating with made-up stories and illusions. It does this to enroll you into keeping it in power so that it may continue to rule over your life and decisions. With that being said, there are many benefits of exploring the shadow part of yourself, which can elevate your consciousness to new levels. The most important element that must be present to do so is an act of courage, as examining that part of yourself is often painful and difficult to endure. The shadow, or egoic aspect of you, is not always dark by nature. Sometimes it acts just as any normal person would act. But if you ignore it, take it for granted, or misunderstand it, it will become hostile. If you are dealing with someone whose shadow self is in control, the best way to navigate through it is to stay calm, unemotional, and logical, so that you won't trigger a hostile reaction. It is thought that only the shadow self is aggressive or assertive, but that isn't the case. While the ego, or shadow self, can possess these qualities, so can the divine self. Aggression is not sequestered to the ego self alone. That's why when it comes to aggression, or any emotion that isn't love, one must look at the agenda of the individual in order to understand if it is the ego or the divine self that is propelling it. Observing the agenda and core motive is the one way to understand if someone's aggression is coming from love or something that's inauthentic. By paying attention to your emotions and your agenda in every situation, you can better understand your shadow self and begin to refine its painful aspects by becoming accountable and aware of its actions. There is no light without shadow, and no life can exist without its shadow counterpart. The balance of shadow and light within the self must occur for life to exist. In order for enlightenment to occur, one must choose to reparent the shadow and decide who should be in charge, your divinity or the shadow. If you wish to pursue enlightenment, you must choose for the divine to be in charge. This is when heavy negotiations begin with the shadow and an enrollment to participate in life as only your divinity can. This is known as bringing your darkness into the light, or as the reparenting of your ego. This is less about accomplishing an egoic idea of what perfectionism means, and more about attaining wholeness and completion. This, in turn, creates a balance between your conscience and your unconscious mind. The shadow is sometimes thought of as the devil or being possessed by the devil or a demon when someone's shadow self becomes all-encompassing. To recover, the individual must have a deep hunger for purification and an insatiable craving to understand the deepest parts of the self. There must also be a complete understanding of both sides of the self, meaning the shadow and the light. With this comes the understanding of how dark you are capable of being and how much good you are capable of. With that realization comes an acceptance and a profound forgiveness, followed by learning how to unconditionally love the self. Being accountable morally, politically, and spiritually is of paramount importance to self-liberation and God realization. Because you can't serve two masters, you cannot choose to live as your shadow self and your divine self at the same time. Just like the yin and the yang, the two sides will always be separated. Therefore, you must choose. Will you choose who you are as light and embrace who you are authentically as a being of unconditional love? Or will you choose the shadow, who is the embodiment of lies and illusion? The choice is yours. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.